and welcome to July. I've got some exciting news to share with you for this month's Asian Australian HAPS update. I've got a new co-host and co-producer, Nan Kim.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I too am Australian Korean and I work in news as a producer. I'm interested in everything Asian Australian, so let's get straight into it.
So I saw this meme circulating on Facebook about how the international media's attention is purely on coronavirus at the moment, which means we're missing out on important updates on what's happening around the world. We wanted to draw attention to some of the haps in Hong Kong at the moment. So China introduced this new national security law in Hong Kong on June 30th. The law came into effect an hour before the 23rd anniversary of Hong Kong's handover from Britain to China.
Hong Kong had a mini constitution called Basic Law, which includes the right to vote, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech. But none of these rights exist in mainland China.
The new law overrides Basic Law, which, as we mentioned before, guarantees Hong Kong citizens basic rights and freedoms.
That's why this new law is so controversial.
It basically gives the Chinese government extensive power to target activists who criticize the Chinese Communist Party, and some offences can even lead to life imprisonment. Under Article 48, the central government in Beijing will set up a new office in Hong Kong with hand-picked law enforcement officials. This office can send cases to be tried in mainland China, where there's just no guarantee of a fair trial. If a case is heard in Hong Kong, it can take place behind closed doors if it's deemed to include state secrets. So this is how Australia responded. Firstly, Australia suspended its extradition agreement with Hong Kong. In addition, Hong Kong citizens on a student, a temporary graduate, or a temporary skilled shortage visa can extend their stay in Australia by an additional 5 years. This affects about 10,000 Hong Kong citizens already living in the country.
How this happened was under the leadership of Bob Hawke, when Australia offered safe haven visas after the fallout from Beijing's Tiananmen Square protests in 1989.
One interviewee that I spoke to actually said that in their opinion, the Chinese government hasn't really changed since the whole Tiananmen Square incident, and that this time around, the Chinese government is just better at covering up.
Just hours after the law was passed, people have been deleting their Twitter accounts. Even Joshua Wong, who was the leader of the Umbrella Movement in 2014, disbanded his pro-democracy group. But people are finding new and creative ways to protest still. So graffiti has even been spotted on a bridge at Causeway Bay, which was a key spot for pro-democracy activists. It reads, "Arise ye who refuse to be slaves." And that's actually the first line of the Chinese national anthem. So whichever way you look at it, it could have been written by a nationalist, or it could have been a sign of protest.
In the next update, when we're talking about Asian Australian haps, there are some not so good parts to the story too. Quick trigger warning, this next part contains references to child exploitation and child pedophilia.
The coronavirus pandemic has significantly reduced international travel, so that means a lot of the crimes have moved online.
The Philippines is known as the hub for child sexual abuse. Since March, there's been about 300,000 cases of sexual abuse alone. And in one particularly disturbing case, 7 children, including one 3-month-old baby girl, were rescued from a home in Manila.
Several Australian men have also been arrested in the Philippines and charged with online abuse. Much of it is driven by poverty and widespread internet access.
The International Justice Mission, an organisation that helps rescue trafficked children, estimates that about 18% of online pedophiles are men in Australia. It also estimates that 87% of cases involves a female trafficker or perpetrator, and most often it's the perpetrator's mother.
I find that really disturbing because even as an Australian Korean, you sometimes forget that in Australia there are economic implications here, and people are worried about their next paycheck, but in impoverished countries like the Philippines, that situation could have easily been me or you if we were born in those countries.
And on that note, our community also has a role to play. We might not be in the Philippines, but we can stop it from where it's happening here in Australia. These conversations might be really disturbing and uncomfortable, but we have a role to play in saying no to child sexual abuse from here in Australia. Now on to other news. So anti-Asian sentiment has been on the rise since the China virus has surfaced.
And I've certainly noticed a lot of discomfort in the Asian Australian community here. My cousin was actually telling me the other day he went shopping with his son and he was confronted by a white Australian woman who was angry at him for being out in public in the first place. I think it's very confronting and more has to be done. There was one really cool video that I saw that brought lots of his Asian American celebrities like Lucy Liu to tackle all these racist attitudes.
We must all stop the stigma. We must all stop the xenophobia. We must all stop the hate.
we've talked about a lot of different updates, but for the final part, we wanted to do some quick shout outs. The first one features our talented friend who has launched a new crocheted bag collection called Chibe. The crocheted bags are made from recycled t-shirt fabric.
And I love how the name is Korean, Chibe, which means home, and I think you should check it out. So the second one we wanted to mention was actually a cookbook that could help you with your isolation, which was actually launched by 2 Australian Asian chefs. We're actually sick of seeing everyone baking the same things on their Instagram feed, so if you don't want to be the next basic person, why not try out some new Asian recipes and bring out your MasterChef game to your next dinner party.
There was also a pretty cool online live stream by One of One Records, which featured 10 Asian Australian artists, and the event was to fundraise for Food Bank, a charity that provides food relief for hungry families. That was a really awesome initiative to see the Asian Australian community, especially some of the creatives, banding together to give back to people in need. And special shout out to Saint for creating and launching the series.
And last but not least was actually a video created by Shona, which has since gone viral. I've seen it everywhere on my Facebook, even LinkedIn feeds. Well, it's actually really, really relevant, and I feel like it's something that a lot of people relate to because I've certainly felt it. It's about the feeling of wanting or the need to change your name, your Asian name, get a better chance at getting an interview or getting your foot in the door in your career.
I started signing off my emails and my resumes with Shona Young instead of Shona Yang. I guess it was because I felt like Shona Young could pass as a British surname, and it would kind of prevent that awkward conversation with people thinking, oh, is your English okay? Can you write in English well? I knew I could never hide the fact that I was Asian, but if I could just kind of delay that until after the application process, I thought that would give me a better chance at finding a job, especially in the media landscape where I didn't see a lot of names with surnames that sounded like mine.
I remember when I was in uni, my uni professor was advising me that I should write at the top of my resume that I can speak English fluently, even though I was born and raised here. It's a shame that that's still happening.
Yeah, it's crazy because that article was initially written in 2018, and it's really interesting to see that it's still resonating with people. If you have an interesting story attached to your name and your experience like Dylan's, please let us know, and we'd love to share your story in our next monthly video. And that's a wrap for July and our first video co-hosted together. We did it.
We did,
with lots of coffee and carbs.
Yep. And now time for some kimchi.
Bye.